Are you ready?
Oh, yeah!
From parts unknown and into your home, this is the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. Now, here's your host, Groovy G.
Hello there folks and welcome to the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. On this episode, if you watched wrestling or mixed martial arts in the 1980s, 90s or 2000s, you would have seen belts made by this man. I'm talking of course about the king of belts himself, Mr. Reggie Parks. He joins me right now.
You're watching the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. For your official Groovy G Belt Podcast merchandise, check out www.groovygshop.com.
Mr. Reggie Parks, welcome to the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's been a long time since I've been down under. I was there in 1968. I had an enjoyable time there. I spent about 3 months.
And who were you working for down here?
Jimmy something.
Yeah, it might have been Jim Barnett. He used to run World Championship Wrestling from Melbourne, Victoria. But that was in the 60s and 70s, so that was a little bit before my time.
But anyway, I remember I was there with Killer Kowalski, a bunch of good guys there. I remember the promoter saying, this is the best-looking crew I've ever been here and drew the least money. That's I remembered his words.
Now, you are actually from Canada originally, and you were trained by none other than the legendary WWE Hall of Famer Stu Hart, father, of course, of Bret and Owen Hart.
There you go. That's where I got my tutoring. But somehow I escaped being talked into going to the dungeon, where you really would have got it.
Yeah, because he was a legitimate tough guy, wasn't he? He was a stretcher.
Yes, sir. Boy, this guy was he was one of the best. He'd take these guys in that thought they were wrestlers, and he'd have them crying and screaming down there in the dungeon. And I remember his wife got down from the stairs, and she said, Stu, let him go. You're going to kill him. I said, you got to teach this little bastard something. That's the way he'd talk. Oh boy. But before that, in my wrestling career, I started with a bunch of young guys there, and some of them were good enough to be openers on the big shows. And I got in. I had my first pro match when I was 16 years old. And then when I was 18 years old, I spent 6 months wrestling on the carnival, taking on all comers. So I've been through a lot of it.
Oh wow, that is pretty impressive. Now, during your career, you were known as the Quiet Superman, and you had a pretty impressive physique looking at some old photos. Now, some of the things you used to do were push-ups on your fingertips, and you even had a car run over your stomach at one stage. Tell us about that.
Yes, I did that. We started that. The promoter in Omaha, he said, we used to be a guy here that could have a car, the old cars in the 20s and 30s. They weren't that heavy, they were kind of light. So he said, you think you could do that? I said, I don't know, let's go try it. So we pulled one of the little Volkswagens down underneath the building, and I had me get down there, and that sort of started kind of pushed and lifted the car over me, and I said, well, how's that feel? I said, oh, that's all right. Okay, we'll do it 2 or 3 times here, see how it feels. Okay, now we're going to do it without us helping the lifted car. So they rolled it over me. I said, how's that? Well, it's a little bit heavier, but it's okay. I can handle that. So then we got that settled, and we got ready to get some promos on it. Guy's going to let a car run over him. Okay, so we did that, and I'd had a towel. I don't know why I did that. I had a towel over my, I didn't want to get dirty, I guess. So the phone starts ringing, and people say, oh, he had something under that towel. I said, well, okay, let's do this again. So we got it without the towel. I had the tire prints over my belly, and I just stood up there and got in there. We did an interview with my tire prints on my stomach. And then from there on, I was known as the man with the cast iron stomach.
Oh, wow. That's dedication. Do you still hit the gym today?
Well, yeah, so I was there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I go, I've I've got the LA Fitness here right next door to me. It's very easy to get to. I could walk there if I want to, but I get in my vehicle and just drive around the corner and I'm there. So it's still getting my workout in.
So how does someone who is a professional wrestler get into making the title belts used by the pro wrestlers?
That all started in 1962. I was booked into the Midwest area of the United States, which is Omaha, Nebraska was the central part of it. And I stayed there, it was my headquarters, and I worked in that area most of the time. And then I made several trips back to Canada, and then about 3 trips to Japan. And then the one trip I made to Australia, Korea, and back and forth for Canada. So I spent about a total of 13, 14 years in that area.
Yeah, and you're quite successful there. You tag teamed a little bit with Doug Gilbert and Woody Farmer.
That's the guys, you betcha. And we had this huge trophy, and we had to take it apart to haul it in the car. And so we said, well, Joe Dusick is the promoter. Joe, that's too much trouble taking that thing. And you got to take it out of the car, put it together, and then you got to drag it in the ring, and then the bad guys, of course, would give it a kick and it'd fall over, and then we had to put it together again. And so after that, he said, well, I said, Joe, we need a pair of tag team belts. And he said, well, as long as you can make something presentable, we could use them. So apparently, my belts were very presentable. And they started from there. The guys came down from Minnesota, and remember Larry Anning and Harley Race. They were going to bring their belts with it, and they said, "Oh, we're going to leave ours in the suitcase because yours looked a lot better than mine."
Now, there were title belts around at the time, but I'm assuming they were those trophy-style title belts?
Well, there was a tag. I don't know who made them at first, but there was several people going back and forth to Japan to wrestle, and Dick Myers was going over, and he said, "Could you make me a belt? I want to take it to Japan." I said, "Okay, when are you going?" So I put in a rush order, made it in a few days. Anyway, that started it, and then the orders kept coming in from Japan for years after that. And that was very nice. I like doing bets with them. They'd send me money, and I knew it was for a belt, but I didn't know what they wanted. And about 2-3 weeks later, they'd call me up. So that was fun.
Let's go back to wrestling belts. So you mentioned before that they had trophies that they used, and then you decided that you needed something better.
Yeah, we had a tag team trophy, and that thing was just a nuisance to carry around and put it together and take it apart and all that. So I made tag team belts, and then from there I made some tag team belts for the Minnesota office for Vern Gagne, and then several other belts I made. I made 2 tag team belts that went to Canada for the Vachon. Mad Dog and his brother, they started the promotion there. They had very good luck. Made a lot of money there because they brought that's where Andre the Giant came in, and lucky enough to get in there with that company with the Giant and all that. Well, there's a lot of stories with that, with the bar with him, and when the Frenchman would have a few drinks, they'd think they could do something with him. That was hilarious.
Yeah, Andre was known for having a bit of a bad temper.
Yeah, well, he was good. He was one of the nicest old big guys that you ever met. He called everybody. If you're a 3 foot tall midget or 7 foot tall, he'd call everybody boss. Hello, boss. That was him.
Did you ever work with Andre?
Only as a referee. So I was refereeing. They'd always in Montreal when I was. They'd always put 3 guys in there with him. We'd do things like he'd pile these 3 guys in the corner, and then he'd belly bump them and just knock the hell out of them. And I was that guy. One time I remember being right behind him, and I tried to grab his arm, and I said, being a referee, like, okay, that's enough. You're going to kill these guys. So he just swung his arm backwards, and I went flying backwards. I couldn't stop myself. I landed in the other corner of the ring. I thought, Jesus, what the hell? And he had this superhuman strength, and he could do all kinds of stuff with you. I don't know if you've seen that picture of him. I think he had girls sitting on each arm, and he was holding them up. I traveled with him a few times, and we had a party. Boys had a party in Amarillo, Texas. Most of the people had left, so I was the only guy, and Andre. And I said, Andre, I just got a small car, and I could take you, but I don't. And he said I could fit, boss. I said, all right, let's try it. So I got a little Camaro and put him in the front seat somehow. I don't know. My head was outside and I had my shoulder, and somehow I drove that car about 2 miles to get back to the hotel. And I tell that story a lot because you can't imagine how big he was, and somehow he fit in my car, and I took him from the party to the hotel. And then we had other times I traveled with him, with a bunch of guys, and we had one story was we had Mike Graham, Eddie Graham's son was promoting, and we were booked in this Tallahassee, which is a town north of northern part of Florida. So he rented a limousine. So we've got five of us plus 6 of us in the limousine, including the driver. So we get going, and of course everybody gets their beer, and we pile into the thing, and there's Mike. He's going down the road 100 miles an hour, and here comes the red lights behind him. So they stop him, and he gets out, and he's kind of talking to the policeman on the back of it. So one by one, the guys piled out of the limousine to say hello to the officer. So finally, the last guy gets out. It was Andre the Giant. And he gives this policeman, said, "Hello, boss." And the policeman looks at him, and then he looks at the rest of us, and he said, "Well, you guys have a good time now. Just light up on the beer and slow down a little bit. Have a good time." Okay. And he got in his vehicle and left. He could have, an average person traveling 100 miles an hour, he would have probably got a $200-300 ticket plus drinking. Oh, he was good down there.
Now, let's fast forward in time a little bit to the early 1980s. Now, you were making the belts for the World Wrestling Federation and also Jim Crockett Promotions, who was promoting the NWA in their territory. How did you come into making belts for them?
I made a bunch of belts for Jim Crockett Promotions down in North Carolina, and I spent several. I was in there 2 or 3 times, I think. And the last time, George Scott. I don't know if you're familiar with him, George and Sandy. They're both gone now. They were the bookers there, and George called me up and he said, "Hey, your body looks pretty good yet." And he said, "But your head's getting old. How about putting a mask on and coming down here?" I said, "Well, I never did that, but I'll give it a try." And hell, I get down there, and I was the Avenger, and they had another guy, Don Jardine. He was like super destroyer, the bad guy. I was the best guy and the good guy. And we sold out a bunch of buildings over there.
And what about the belts for the Crockett's?
Well, let's see. Yeah, the Crockett's were, I remember making these belts early times, not my design, but they would have little chains put between the buckles. You ever seen a belt like that?
Yeah, they're the real old-timey ones, those ones.
Yeah, the real old ones. Yeah, they're the real old-timers. Well, I did one with put these little chains in there. So as the thing laid on the table, it looked pretty damn good. But when you bent that leather over, those chains were not long enough, and they all snapped off. So that was. I think I only did one of those because I had the problems with that. Everybody, they either get hung up on something or something. There was all constantly they'd be falling off the buckles. So I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. All my publicity, it preceded me wherever I went. He said, "You make belts. You make belts." I say, "I make for everybody." So we need some belts here and whatever. We made them all over. I had went to Florida. We made them there and made a beautiful belt for Florida. Terry Funk is there, and he's in the ring. Gets in the ring, just made this beautiful belt, and he grabbed that thing and he smashed it against the ring post, and
let's talk about some specific belts if we can. I'm talking here about the Hulk Hogan 84 and 85 that was used as the world title for the WWF, and it was very similar to some other designs that you had for Jim Crockett promotions, in particular the NWA TV title, that was the one on the red leather, and the NWA National title. Now, did the WWF or Jim Crockett promotions care that they were similar designs, or did they just not worry about the designs?
No, they were quite different. They weren't as elaborate as the ones that went to WWF.
Okay, let's talk about another belt that debuted around about this time as well too. I'm talking about the classic WWF Intercontinental title belt. Do you remember anything about that belt?
I sure do.
What are your memories on that one?
That was a very, very popular design. And that wasn't my favorite belt for some reason. I don't know why. Why it was so famous. You could duplicate that to fit any other belt. Like if you wanted something like whoever was wanting something, for the interior of it, the outer design was always the same, but the interior you could put all kinds of names, things. So we have for the Coyotes hockey team, we put a big picture of the Coyote in the middle of it. Made it for football, Chicago Bears football team. We had bears in the middle of those things. All kinds of things. God, I'm looking through the boxes here. I'm running it across that design. Once every 10 belts I look at, the Intercontinental design is there. Inside is always different people, different such and such a design of some such and such all kinds of weird stuff. I think that's the most used design I've ever come up with, and it was a lot of people wanted that. They would use that thing, and then they'd send a picture of it, and this is what we want here, so such and such a champion and all that. But it's still popular design. I still use it there. I see it on WWE.
Okay, let's move forward in time again to 1988. The WWF debut a new world title belt, which has probably become your most famous belt, the Winged Eagle. Did Vince McMahon himself ask you to make that title belt, or did someone from the office call? What was the process like in getting that belt made?
Usually, one of the guys, like the chief that was working for the
Chief J. Strongbow?
Strongbow, yeah. He was because I knew him. He's just a good old Italian boy, so I know him from Florida. So he was doing. He'd say, "Well, we made the Hogan '85 with the side pieces with the history of the WWE champions. You familiar with that belt?"
Oh yeah, that's the one that was similar to some of the designs that were being used by the Crockett's.
Okay, now then from there he said, "Well, we need something a little different. And how about some flags or something?" Okay, then the next one was Hogan '86 with the flags. And about a year or so later, I'm in Phoenix again, and here's Joe Scarpa, and he said, "Well, we're going to make another belt, something different." Okay, something different. So we came up with the Winged Eagle bar belt, and that thing was probably the most famous wrestling belt in history. It was used for about 10 years, I imagine.
Now, the Winged Eagle had some pretty unique features. One of them was the twisted bars that were on the side. Now, you had made another belt. It was an AWA platter belt that also featured bars on the side. Where did the idea for the twisted bars for the Winged Eagle come from?
I sort of got the idea from that AWA belt, because that one was originally made for the Ring magazine. That belt was not, I don't think it had said AWA, but it was designed for the magazine, Ring magazine, and that was mostly for the boxing. They had a little 2 or 3 page area in the back of it. It was, for the wrestling business, but it was the Ring magazine, and I don't know if it had to be in the 40s and 50s.
And that's where the bars came from.
And that's where Vern Gagne had his made for, and he had me make him. I don't know what he was going somewhere else, not somewhere else, but I think he had something to do with the promotion around Memphis, Tennessee. and he wanted one of those belts there, and I remember making one for that organization.
So with the overall design of the Winged Eagle, whose idea was it to have the big eagle? Was it the WWF's? Was it Chief Jay Strongbow's? And whose idea was the wrestlers and all the other elements in it?
We designed it here. The guy that worked here for Ted Miller, he made some, a few little designs and things and that, and about this and that's good. How about that? He was really good. And what was this? Oh, that's good. And let's try this looking with bars on it. I put the bars on there, and the eagle and the bars and stuff, and he designed several of those belts with the different logos on them. I'm looking at the Winged Eagle belt with the W on it. I'm looking at it with the crown on it, and different names. I mean, there was like I don't know. I'd probably have 15, 20 of them with different things on it.
Now, you're talking about Teddy Miller, who was the owner of Tucson Trade Engravers. They used to engrave and make your plates that you used to use. Now, the guy that designed them, that worked for Teddy, do you remember his name at all?
Not offhand, I don't. He was just there for a couple, 2 or 3 years.
Did the WWF or did any of the wrestling companies give you like a brief of what they wanted? Did they want an eagle? Did they want wrestlers?
No, not really. No, we just one time we just designed this belt, and Winged Eagle. I took it to Phoenix because I was wrestling there. I'm not wrestling, refereeing that night, and I said, "Here." Hogan was there. I said, "Here, Hulkster, I've got a new belt for you." Oh, jeez, he said, "That's pretty nice." So he started. That's where he first place he ever wore it. He wasn't even on TV that night.
The Winged Eagle, it had different leather cuts. Like the Hulk Hogan one had a bit of a rounder one, whereas later ones, the things. Whose idea was the leather cuts?
Yeah, it was more of a rounder cut. And I don't know where that lining with. I think it's probably one of my designs, because I sort of like to follow the design of the main buckle. You know what I mean? Give it the same design as the product inside the belt.
What about the like the tooling around it and in the snap boxes? That's what you're pretty famous for now. Whose idea was that?
No, those snap boxes are with my clamshell design all around the edges, and I was the first guy to put tips on belts. I got a guy, my jeweler. He's the guy that makes those tips. I got that idea by traveling, following trucks, semi trucks on the highway, and they'd have mud flaps on the backs of the flaps on the tires, and they had a strip of metal on the bottom of that mud flap on the truck. I said, "Boy, that might be a good idea. Put that on the belt." So we tried that, and I don't know how many hundred of those damn tips we made. I had other belt makers call me, "Could you give me some of those tips?" Well, of course I wouldn't give it to them. I said, "If you want something like that, you go make it yourself." My idea.
How many Winged Eagles would the WWF order at a time?
Oh, I would think one of the most bunch I made, I think was about 8 of them, made them for Hulk Hogan. He'd give them away to his friends, presents.
With the plating, because the Winged Eagle started out with gold and nickel plating. Whose idea was that?
Well, that's kind of my idea, dual plating. I thought that would look awful good. I saw something done in that, not a belt, but something else done in dual plating. So we had to figure out how to do this. So we had a look like paint. You do the nickel belt, then you paint off the areas that you didn't want the gold. So then you'd have these little areas in there that when they did the gold plating, that would plate. And then after that, you'd take we used some kind of a stop-off lacquer or something that was called, and that was used for airplane paint. That was a good one, because it was really, it really sticks to things, and you'd have to have a some special stuff to get the paint off to leave your gold and nickel. So anyway, the dome glove belt, they do that first as copper, then silver, nickel, and then gold. So then after it's all done, then they tape off the area around the dome and then just buff it off. Just buff the gold off. And just there you are with a nice dome, nickel dome in the middle of the gold. And all that it takes a little time to figure out how the hell to do all that stuff. But I still learn how to do things. Sometimes I got to make sure I got my glasses on now when I'm working because I screw up sometimes.
Can you talk me through like the whole process from start to beginning of how you came about like designing a belt? So you said before that one of Teddy's guys at the engraver's shop would come up with some designs. Then what would they do from there?
He would come up. Like they draw a circle and they say here's their kind of belt championship. It'll be heavyweight, lightweight, no weight, or whatever thing, and the sides and whatever. And then Teddy he had books here. I got some of them. I picked up this stuff from his shop, like 1,000 different designs, and he was very, very computer literate. He could design things on the computer, and that's how he did most of his work. He'd pick out these designs, and he had like all of these people's pictures and wrestling figures and all that kind of stuff. He had all that thing on his computer.
So then they'd print that out onto a negative?
They put it. It comes out black and white like a picture, and then they got a machine that turns it into a negative, and then the negative, they took the negative on the metal, and it burns the image on the metal some way. I don't know how that works. It's way over my head. Then you put your metal inside. It looks like a dishwasher, splashing acid all over that thing, and the acid etching, it'll etch anything that's not covered by this design. If you do not, you could maybe do, I don't know, what do you call it? If you had like a bath, he'd call it, and it would go spin around for like maybe 2 belts. But if you got too much metal involved in that bath, you'd get all kinds of pimples and dimples in your belt, and then you'd have to take it out of there, and you'd spend a hell of a long time trying to clean all that stuff up. You'd chisel these belt things off and sand it all down and try to get smooth. So,
Let's fast forward in time again to when the WWF stopped using your belts. I think they stopped using them they stopped ordering them around 1996, but they stopped using them on TV around 1998. Can you remember why that came about?
Well, I think about they started something different. Well, they went from the WWF. I think that started when the World Wildlife Federation sued them for the name. You remember that?
Yeah.
So that was WWF. So Vince says, well, the hell with these guys. Okay, we'll go with WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. Now the WWF on the belts, that was no good anymore. See what I mean?
And did they also not want you to make belts for the general public and belt collectors anymore?
Well, some lady that was a lawyer or something called me one time. They said, I understand you're making belts for everybody, and the only belt I did make was for about a 5-year-old kid. It was like 3-4 inches tall, and it was kind of a replica. And she said, "Oh, we don't want you to do this anymore and you send us all your molds." She wouldn't even know. She didn't even know the what to call all the artwork. She called them molds. And so I remember that. So after that, everything sort of quieted down, and then we started dealing with these people that wouldn't know a hammerlock or a headlock from a padlock. All they were doing is they like movie business and whatever they did, nothing to do with wrestling. That's what you get now.
How did you feel when they said that they didn't want to use your belts anymore?
I was busy as hell because I had Ed Shulman here, my business manager. We had all kinds of stuff. We got orders here. We were making UFC Ultimate Fighting belts. We had about 4 or 5, 6 at a time.
Yeah, can you tell me about the UFC titles? They were stacked plates, so they would have been heavy.
No, not anything. It wasn't anything heavier. The only heavy belt we saw was about 3-layered belt that went to Japan here about 10 years ago.
That would have been the New Japan one, the International Wrestling Grand Prix belt.
I think it was what in New Japan. I got pictures of it with different guys. It's a beautiful belt. It had all kinds of names on it. Oh crap! They're really expensive. I don't know. It's like $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 or something.
Let's talk about the UFC title belts. Have you got any memories on them? How did they set the jewels? How many did the UFC order at one time?
Yeah, they were started out. The original guy from Columbus, Ohio,
Joe Marshall.
Joe Marshall. He tried to make those belts, but he couldn't get. He couldn't do it because he didn't have the people there or whatever it was. He couldn't do it. So they came to us. Of course, we had all the facilities here to take care of all that stuff. I remember Dana White talking to Schumann. He said, "We just love what you do here. We're going to keep you for life." And I said, "Well, that's pretty nice. Okay." So we're doing. I think about 2 years, maybe 3 years. We did their belts. We did four, two at a time, four, sometimes six at a time. First, we started making like heavyweight, welterweight, lightweight, and then they said, "Well, what the hell? We don't need that. We just will have one belt for everything, for all weights." So anyway, that's the way they stayed that way. They got those poor little 115-pound girls that they put those things on. Oh, Christ, that was belts for from their boobs down to their knees when they put them on. Poor little girls, all those things around. But anyway, that was about till all of a sudden they found out for $2,000-3,000 belt, $4,000 maybe. All of a sudden they found out they could make them in China maybe for less than maybe $200. Well, all you do is just send them a belt and they copy that to a T. You see what they could do now. Jesus.
So they're the replica belts that are made in China, and the UFC actually did award those replicas that were put on real leather to their champions for a while as well too. Now, you did the leather for one of those replicas for me quite recently. How do you feel about those Chinese replicas? What are your thoughts on them?
Well, look at what you got there. That's way better than what I could do here. I like to do the re-leathering job. You see a belt on TV, okay? That belt, okay. So you get that, you buy that thing from the wrestling stores, you take it apart, and you put it on real leather. I mean, it would take somebody that had a real old belt of mine in their hands to see. Even then, you couldn't tell. The only giveaway is they don't roll the buckles as much or hardly at all. The main buckle's got a slight roll to it. The one you got there, the UFC, is done pretty good. That was pretty good. But the side pieces were any one of those things that had side pieces, they don't roll them because they got the bolts on the back, so you can't put them in through the roller. So you're screwed like that.
There are some companies in Pakistan and some in the US as well too that make unauthorized copies of your designs. They're known as bootlegs in the belt collecting community. What do you think about people using your designs without your permission, people using these bootlegs and making bootlegs?
I've seen some of that work. It's pretty crappy. They charge you like $200, and that wouldn't even cost the shipping for a belt for mine. And I don't know how they do that. I can't remember ever seeing really, never had one in my hands. Seen them on pictures, and they don't look that good. Oh yeah, how are you going to do that? That's $200 for a belt. What the hell is that?
Now, one person that does use your designs, but he has your permission, is David Milliken, the ace of belts. How does Dave Milliken fit into the belt picture?
Dave and I started doing stuff, little bit by little bit. Yeah, I taught him most of what he knows, and he's always been pretty grateful at that. He's made some good money, and he's run into problems now because of the fact that Ted Miller's not longer in business, and he had orders made, and he had nobody to do the engraving. So therefore, some of those orders were not fulfilled.
Now, you're talking again about Ted Miller, who used to own Tucson Trade Engravers, who were the etching company that used to make all of your, and Dave's plates as well too. They went out of business, so they sort of left you guys in the lurch, didn't they?
So he's getting all the heat. They think he's a con artist, a thief, and all that shit, but he's not. He doesn't have the somebody to do the engraving.
So what would be a solution for that? Does he have to find, like if you've got an outstanding order, would he have to find someone to do the plates or?
He's got somebody in Iowa. The work is pretty good. I see some of it sent to my platers here. So it looks good. But Rico had one time he had a rush order, and they charged him $1,400 just to etch one belt. That's way too much. Teddy would call. Teddy would charge like $450, $500, whatever, if it was really with the overlays and pieces and parts that more than one layer, he'd have to charge another something else for that. So anything else you need to know?
Just on that man you just mentioned, Rico Man, how does he fit into the picture? He's your business associate, he handles the money, he handles the orders. How does he fit into the picture?
My business associate, he handles the orders, handles the money, and stuff like that.
Rico Man's also a belt designer too, isn't he? He's designed some pretty famous belts, including that New Japan 4th Generation International Wrestling Grand Prix title belt, the one with all the stacked plates.
You ask him for design, he can design a belt in a matter of minutes. He's that good.
Wow. So if you wanted a Reggie Parks belt, you'd go through Rico Man to get it? He's the man to contact?
He's the guy you take to call him, and then matter of fact, I'm doing some re-leathering for 2 jobs for him now.
When Tucson Trade Engravers went out of business, were there any outstanding orders with Rico as well too? You've mentioned that Dave has got some outstanding orders, but has Rico got any outstanding orders as well?
Oh yeah, with Rico too. Rico was stuck for several belts. Some stuff was there for like a couple, 2-3 years. There's just waiting for Teddy to do it, and Teddy would forget. Sometimes the belts were done and they'd be sent to the platers, and the platers would put them up on the shelf somewhere, not knowing who they belonged to. Then they somehow would disappear. Nobody knows where they went.
Are Rico and Dave fixing things up now, or at least trying to fix things up now?
Well, they're trying to get it done. Slowly. It's got, all this stuff that wasn't able to be done is Rico and Milliken. I was never in on this stuff. Sometimes I'll get a letter from one of these guys, and they got all the paperwork and what they sent them on, and the money they spent and all that stuff. The one guy was really hung up. He was selling belts that he never had. He didn't even have them made. He didn't even have it ordered or made yet. And then some of that bullshit was going on. So I'm sorry for those guys that got hung up on that. Then the people that come American, they said, no, he's a thief and all that stuff. They couldn't be, you get a bad name really quick.
But they're trying to fix it up now.
Yeah, they are. Oh, sure. Well, they won't stay in business if they can.
Now, without a proper etcher, I guess it'd be a little bit hard to make belts, but do you still make belts now?
I'd say 80% of my business now is very low. These guys send me these Chinese belts, and I take them apart. They're nice and easy to take apart. The screws come out. There's no leather on the back. Just unscrew them. Build my own leather, do my own thing with the leather, lay this other piece over the top, marker holes where the buckles were, put them on real leather, turn it over, put the screws in, glue the back on it, that's it.
All right, let's change pace a little bit here. What do you think about the current designs that are used by the WWE and the UFC today?
Mixed emotions on that. I think they're getting way too big for because those things they don't fit. You got to be 300 pounds and 7 foot tall to wear one of those things. And those guys, they wear them around, and even those girls who wear those things, they're like a big. It's really awful. They should have, a smaller design for that. They got a design. I don't know who did it for the tag team for the girls, the little gold belts. Now those look nice. And that thing now they used for the UFC. Have you seen that thing?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
It's all hell designed that thing. I have no idea. It's like a big box. I never had a really good look at it. It's just on a cell phone or something. I would put my name on it. That's for sure.
Have you got a favourite belt design of all time?
A favorite belt design. I guess my favorite is probably because of the history. Probably the Winged Eagle. It's got lots of good stuff on it. It got the leather's covered with a lot of buckles. It's a 5-piece belt rather than a 3-piece.
We could keep chatting forever, just picking your brain for all those little nuggets of knowledge, but we'll leave it there. Mr. Reggie Parks, thank you so much for joining us on the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast.
Well, thank you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, sir. There he is, folks, the king of belts, Mr. Reggie Parks.
Very good. Bye-bye now.
You're watching the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. For your official Groovy G Belt Podcast merchandise, check out www.groovygshop.com.
There he is, folks, the king of belts himself, Mr. Reggie Parks. Now let's take a sneak peek at what's coming your way on the next Groovy G Championship Belt podcast.
On the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast.
And I guess it's only fitting that on the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast, we take a close-up look at a real Reggie Parks made WWF block logo Winged Eagle. In the meantime, make sure you don't miss a thing by subscribing to this YouTube channel. You can join in the conversation on Twitter at Groovy G Belt Show or on Facebook. Until then, take care. It's bye for now.